This is a tutorial on how to calculate real GDP. So to begin with, what I want to do is remind us why we have to remove inflation from GDP. Okay, so real GDP is just the output that is produced in 1 year. So we will measure that not in terms of what's produced, but the dollar value of what's produced. And the thing is that we have to convert those dollars to a single year's dollar value so that multiple years can be compared. So, for example, we've already done this, but if you'll recall, in the economy of Bikini Bottom, they produced nothing but Krabby Patties. And in year one, they produced 1, 2, 3 Krabby Patties, $2 a piece. That means their nominal GDP is $6. Okay? How do we know that? We just added up what was produced times what its cost was, or what its purchase price is, its value. Okay? Now, we're going to say that year one is also the base year. Therefore, the nominal GDP, which is just the price times the output, okay, is also the real GDP. The reason it's the real GDP is because there is no inflation in year one. Okay? Year two comes along, and Bikini Bottom produces 2 Krabby Patties at $3.05 each. Okay? So now the new nominal GDP is 305 times 2, which is $6.10. Okay? Note that if we just look at the nominal GDPs, their nominal GDP increased by 10 cents. You know, and if that's all we looked at, we would say, okay, that's good, they've grown. Okay? But what we're going to do when we convert to real GDP is that we just basically remove the inflation. So that 305 becomes $2 again. This 305 becomes $2 again. And so now both Krabby Patties added together gives us a real GDP of $4. Now when we compare the $6 that we used to have with the $4, you can tell that GDP actually shrank by $2. Okay? So that's the importance of converting to real GDP. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little exercise. Okay? And we're going to, well, first of all, we're going to use North Korea. And then just for all you brigade people here, I just wanted to point out that the North Korean Army has a brigade. Kind of cool. Okay? So in order to work through this exercise, we need to know these formulas. Okay? There's a thing called the Consumer Price Index, CPI. Okay, we're going to use that just as index. All right, it could be any kind of index. Sometimes it's called a GDP index, GDP deflator. Those are going to end up being, for our purposes, the same thing. Okay, how do you calculate them? Well, we're about to learn about something called a market basket. So to calculate the index or deflator, you take the current year market basket value and you divide by the base year market basket value. Then you multiply by 100. Okay? Nominal GDP, we just calculated a little while ago, so that's not too difficult. It's just price times output. Okay? It's the current price times the current output. Real GDP, here's how we calculate it. We take our nominal GDP and then we divide by that index or that deflator. Okay? Once we've divided by that, then we multiply by 100 to correct for our decimal change, and that's how you do real GDP. That's how you calculate it. Then we're also going to look at growth rate, because real GDP, you know, it's good that we figure that out, but then we also want to know by what percent is the economy either growing or shrinking. And if you'll recall, a 3% growth rate would be considered good. Okay? And so to calculate that, you just take the real GDP in your second year, subtract the real GDP from that first year, and then divide by that real GDP in the first year, and then multiply the whole thing by 100. All right. So to get started, here's what you need to know. Okay? North Korea makes eyeglasses and bad haircuts. Okay? Just a couple of consumer goods and services that they produce. All right? Another thing you need to note is that the market basket we're going to use contains 2 eyeglasses and 1 bad haircut. All right? So think of the market basket, especially in terms of our own economy. It's just a basket of goods that the typical consumer buys. Okay, and every year the government will check to see what that market basket costs. And when it goes up, that indicates there's inflation. So we're going to use that as a measure of inflation so that we can calculate real GDP. All right? So the first thing we do is we're going to calculate nominal GDP. So what formula do I use? This one right here. Nominal GDP equals price times output. So what we'll do for each line is we'll take the quantity of 100 in 2008 times the price of the eyeglasses, which is $2. Okay, then we'll add the quantity of bad haircuts times the price of those bad haircuts, and that way we can actually get this. So it would be 200 plus 500. Nominal GDP in 2008 is 700. Okay. Now I think I'm going to need my calculator for the other ones here. Okay, but we do the same thing for the second year. Okay, take 105, multiply by 2.25, get an answer. Then add to that 102 times 550. And now in the second year, we have GDP of 797.25. Okay? Year 3, 106 times 2.45. That gives us the value of the eyeglasses that were produced. Then we add 107 times 6, and that gives us our nominal GDP for year 3, which is going to be 901.70. Okay, and then lastly, if I can do this one in my head, 100 times 3 plus 100 times 7 gives us 1,000. Okay, so again, if we just look at nominal GDP, it's growing every single year. So what we have to do now is calculate what the real GDP is. And so in order to do that, now we have to focus on the price of the market basket. So the market basket is going to be this formula. It's equal to basically the price of one thing times the quantity of that thing plus the price of the other thing plus the quantity of the other thing, and so on and so on. This isn't a very good actual formula for it, so I'll do this in green. Okay, so we have to remember there's 2 eyeglasses. Okay, so for example, we're going to take the number 2 times the price, and then we're going to add, let's see, there's 1 bad haircut, so we'll add 1 times the price of the haircut. Okay, so that's going to give us $9 for our market basket in 2008. Okay, then in 2009 we're going to take 2 times 2.25 plus the price of the 1 bad haircut, which is $5.50. And so we get a market basket in 2009 of $10. Okay? Then for 2010, we're going to take 2 times the price of the eyeglasses, and then we're going to add 1 times the price of the bad haircut. So we get 4.9 plus 6, 1090. Okay? And then we're going to do the same thing here on the last one. Take 2 times the price of the eyeglasses, and then add to that 1 times the price of the bad haircut. That's 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 times 7 gives us 13. Okay? So that's how you calculate market baskets. First of all, you have to know the quantity of goods that are in the market basket, and you have to know the price of those goods in that day's dollars. Okay? Now, to calculate the GDP deflator, also known as an index, okay, we're going to use this formula. GDP deflator is equal to the current year market basket divided by the base year market basket. Now, it says here that the base year is 2009. So we're going to divide every market basket by 2009's market basket, which is $10. Okay? So the GDP deflator for 2008, we take the current year market basket, which is 9. You divide by the base year market basket, which is 10. Multiply by 100, and we get 90. Okay? Now, for 2009, we'll do the same thing. We'll take the current year, which is 2009's market basket of $10, and we divide by the base year, multiply by 100, and so the base year market basket, the base year index is 100. And that's important because the base year index is always 100. because a number divided by itself times 100 is always 100. Okay? For 2010, we're going to take 10.9, divide by the base year of 10, and what do we get? 10.9 divided by 10 times 100 equals 109. Okay? And then the last one, we'll do 13 divided by 10 times 100, and that one will equal 130. Okay? So that's how we calculate the price index. Now there's a couple of important notes about the price index. What these things mean is this. Prices in 2008 are 90%, okay, of what they were in 2009. In 2009, prices are 100% of what they are in 2009. In 2010, prices are 109% of what they are in the base year. And then finally, in 2011, prices are 130% of what they were in the base year. So if we know that that's how much prices have changed by, we can now convert our nominal GDP into real GDP. So let's change colors back to blue here. So to get real GDP, we use this formula here. Nominal GDP divided by the index times 100. So to do it for 2008, we take our nominal GDP of 700, and we divide by our deflator, which is 90, and then multiply by 100. So what do we get? 700 divided by 90, and then times 100, we get 777.78. So the real GDP is $777.78. Okay? So in 2008, we had to actually inflate the dollar values to make them equivalent to 2009. Okay? Then we do the same thing for 2009. Interesting little factoid. Since nominal GDP is 797.25, and if we divide that by 100 and then multiply by 100, real GDP in the base year is always the same as its nominal GDP. All right, then 2010, we're going to take the nominal GDP of 901.7, and we're going to divide by 109. Whoops. Wrote that wrong. Okay. So we divide by 109, which is the deflator, then we multiply by 100. Okay? So I'm going to do that. 901.7 divided by 109 equals that times 100. So 827.25. I'm going to go ahead and erase this so that it's not so jumbled up. 82725. Okay? And then lastly, for 2011, we take the $1,000 of nominal GDP, we divide by our deflator of 130, and then multiply by 100, and we get 769.23. Okay? So we can now look at these GDP numbers for these 4 years, and we can tell that GDP increased in year 2, and it increased in year 3, but what happened in year 4? Okay? It went down. So now we're going to go ahead and calculate the GDP growth rates. Okay? Now, you cannot calculate a growth rate in the first year because we don't know what happened in 2007. So there's no way to calculate that one. However, we can for 2009. And so I've kind of run out of room here. I'm going to show you all how to do it. First of all, it's calculating a rate of change, which you've done in multiple classes. So you just take the new value of GDP and you subtract the previous value of GDP. That gives you the change. Okay, so another way of writing this, it's just the change in real GDP divided by the previous real GDP, and then multiplying by 100. Okay? So here's the way we're going to do it. For 2009, we're going to take 797.25, and we're going to subtract the previous year's real GDP, which is 777.78. Then we're going to divide by that previous year's real GDP, and then we multiply the whole thing by 100. So I'm going to do 797.25 minus 777.78. I get a number. I divide that by 777.78. I get another number. I multiply that by 100. And it tells me that the growth rate in 2009 was 2.5%. So GDP increased by 2.5%. That means output increased by about 2.5%. Okay? All right. Then the next one. I'm going to go ahead and write it out again so that there's no confusion. The last one I'll just speak. Okay? Actually, I'll do this one without writing down, then I'll write down the last one. Okay? So for 2010, we're going to take the current year's real GDP of 827.25, and we're going to subtract the previous year, which is 797.25. That means we get a change of $30. We divide that $30 by the previous year's GDP, which is 797.25. Okay, then we multiply that answer by 100, and we determine that GDP has increased by 3.76%. Okay, so that's good growth. So they've got 2 years of good, solid growth. Now we know that the following year it went down, so our GDP growth rate is actually going to end up being negative. So again, we just take the change. So for 2011, real GDP was 769.23. We're going to subtract the previous year's 827.25. Then we're going to divide by 827.25 and multiply by 100. So let's do that. 769.25. This is supposed to be a 5. Okay? Minus 827.25. That gives us negative 58, so the change is negative 58 divided by 827.25, and then times 100. That means their GDP decreased by 7.01%. Okay? So that's how we calculate nominal GDP, market baskets, GDP deflators, also known as index, and then real GDP, and then we use the real GDP to determine how the economy is growing. If it's growing, that's a good thing. If it's shrinking, that's a bad thing. Okay? So now we're gonna continue this, and now we're going to calculate inflation rates. Again, this is just rate of change. Okay? And we can use, there's actually 3 things you can use. With the data we have, there's just 2 things we can use. Okay? We're going to use the value of the market basket to calculate inflation, or we can also use the price index. Okay? So what I've done is I've carried forward our market baskets and our price indices from the last slide. And all we're going to do is calculate the rate of change using each of those numbers. Okay? So first thing we'll do is we'll calculate inflation using the market basket. Okay? So it says here to take the current year minus the previous year market basket, and then divide by that previous year, and then multiply by 100. So basically we're taking the change, dividing by the previous, and then multiplying by 100. Okay? So for 2008, we cannot calculate inflation because we don't know what happened in 2007. But for 2009, we can. Let me move that arrow. It's bugging me. There we go. Okay. So for 2009, we're going to take wait a minute, we're using market baskets, right? Yeah. So we're going to take 10, we subtract 9, that gives us our change. Okay, then we divide by 9, and then multiply the whole thing by 100. Let's see what we get. I've got my calculator. So the difference is 1 divided by 9, and then times 100. We get an inflation rate of 11.11%. So basically, prices increased on average by 11.11%. Okay? Now we'll do the same thing. Let's scoot this over a little bit because it looks like I'm not going to have room. For 2010, we take 2010's market basket, and then we subtract 2009's market basket. Okay? Then we divide by 2009's market basket again, and then multiply that whole thing by 100. And what do we get? Let's see, 0.9 divided by 10, and then times 100 gives us an inflation rate of 9%. Okay? And then the last one, we take 13, we subtract 10.9, and then we divide by the 10.9, and then multiply that whole thing by 100. And what do we get? 13 minus 10.9 gives us a change of 2.1. We divide by the previous of 10.9, and then multiply that by 100. Got some pretty hefty inflation now, 19.27%. Okay? Now we're going to do the exact same thing using the price index, and we're going to get the exact same numbers. Okay? So, price index. We're going to take the current year of 100. We subtract the previous year of 90, divide by the previous year's 90, multiply by 100, and we get 11.11%. Okay? Now we do it for 2010. We take our 109, which is our current index. We subtract our previous year's index of 100. Then we divide by that previous index of 100, multiply by 100, and we get 9%. And then the last one, we take 130 as our price index. We subtract 109, and then we divide by 109, and then we multiply by 100, and we get 19.27% again. So that's how to calculate everything that is in this homework assignment. Okay, we've learned to calculate real GDP, market baskets, growth rates, inflation rates, nominal GDP. So this should set you straight. Anyway, there's Kim Jong-un, who was at the Oscars, part of that record-breaking